Hi, today is Thursday, March 30th, 2017. It's the fourth day of the fifth week of Lent, and this is A Swede Speaks. And I was going to talk about one of the legs of the three legs of conservatism, because the conservative society stands on three legs. It's the state, or government, it's private enterprise, and it's the civil society. And what I'm going to talk about now is civil society. What is the backbone of civil society? How do we get a functioning civil society? And really what we need, which might be a fact in some countries, but not in Sweden or Norway, and probably not in Denmark or Finland either, as far as I know. But let's stick with the two countries I know best, Sweden and Norway. We need independent churches. And with that I mean member-funded churches, not funded by government, or funded through members and voluntary donations. Because what happens in Sweden and also in Norway is that religious organizations, if they have the status of a church or a mosque or a synagogue or some kind of temple, they are given money from the state. And what happens then is that, he who pays the orchestra decides the music, And because, of course, you could say that we need lower taxes, yes. We also need a culture of giving, not of forced giving giving or really paying taxes because you're looking at the barrel of a gun. Maybe just mentally, but if you're not paying your taxes, you'll end up in jail. Something's bad gonna happen. But what we need is a culture of voluntary giving. God loves a happy giver. And what would happen if churches were funded completely by their own members and by voluntary donations with no strings attached? You would get churches who, one, and this is important, they would be able to stick to their own beliefs and not have to look over their shoulder and think about what government is going to think about this. And mind you, there has been a heavy Marxist influence on the Church of Sweden and the Church of Norway. Those that used to be the state churches. Actually, the socialists in both Sweden and Norway realized that instead of separating state and church, they would just try to take over the organizations. And that's what they've been doing since 1968, the long march through the institutions. That could be the topic for a video, so I won't digress any more about that right now. But for one, a church funded completely by their own members and by voluntary donations would be able to stand up for its own faith, to stick to its core beliefs, instead of trying to be politically correct and not offend anyone, and because we might risk that the government stops giving us money, and how then are we going to survive? All that stuff. And the other thing, which is just as important and maybe even more important, such a church could really start helping the needy, helping the ones who need help. Because, early in this, what you could call my video making career, it's not an old career yet, and it's still developing. But I have really started to see how evil the welfare state is. And I kind of always knew this, apart from those years when I was a Marxist, but I really didn't like the welfare state then either. But I misunderstood the whole concept. I called it capitalism with a human face instead of socialism with a human face. Now I just look at the welfare state as an evil control mechanism, really. And by making sure that you have a large group of people who are dependent on the state, you can really control them. And I guess that's why Because in the Swedish debate, a lot of the discussion has been going on about how you need to have all these transfers of money between different groups of people in the economy to make sure everyone is fed, no one is starving, and so on, and it all sounds nice. But what they're not saying is that many, I think maybe most of the people in Sweden are really just paying taxes to get it back as some kind of benefit. Money that they could have saved and invested for themselves instead, but of course then they wouldn't be dependent on the government. And so I think maybe there should be some kind of basic welfare. I don't know. I'm getting more and more skeptic about that too. But I think that, well, a bureaucrat can make a decision and give you money, and can give you some kind of economic, not really economic stability either, because you never know what the bureaucrat is going to say next month or next year or how, whatever. But they can't interact with you on a human level. It just becomes, what does the rule book say about your case? How are we going to treat your case? While a church or a church organization would be able to, well, they would be able to help you out. They would be able to talk to you, to figure out what's going on with you, to see what can you do to improve your situation. Do we have anyone in our network that could help you out with this? If you're willing to do the job, are we able to help you to get it? Are we able to help you? It would be a much more humane thing to do, really. And then you would get help from friends, from your brothers and sisters in your faith. And because, I mean, freedom is a nice word. It's a very good word that I really like. But when you're talking freedom, for instance with Swedes or Norwegians, I mean, I had a discussion with a Norwegian liberal, and he was really left liberal, and we were discussing this with making people independent. I mean, having independent people, strong families, and a civil society, the network around them, that wouldn't depend on benevolent politicians. And he said to me, I don't think independent people is a good idea. Because I didn't really get a good explanation of why, but he illustrated the Scandinavian mindset. I think it's Jante's law turned into politics. We don't know what's going to happen if people are independent. If we have a welfare state to control them, well, then at least we can control them. And so freedom is a difficult word in this part of the world, because in Sweden, if you have seen the documentary A Swedish Fear of Love, it's very difficult to find it online and to get the movie to function. But one of the points of that movie is how there was sort of a revolution, or not a revolution, but there was sort of a mentality shift in Sweden going on from 1968 to 70s and so on. And what the government was trying to do, and what the politicians on the left tried to do, and mostly succeeded with, sadly, was that they tried to make sure that no one in Sweden would depend on anyone else. That means women shouldn't depend on their husbands, children shouldn't depend on their parents, you shouldn't depend on your neighbors, you shouldn't depend on your friends, you shouldn't depend on your relatives or family. No, if you have trouble, come to us, come to the state, and we will fix everything for you. And that's like how they destroyed a lot of the civil society in Sweden. And the part that were left, I mean, there are lots of associations in Sweden, and even church organizations. They were given government aid, money from the state, money from the local, from the municipalities, from the counties. So they more or less turn them into a part of government. So the third leg of the conservative chair is missing in Sweden, and that's why it doesn't function. Because freedom really works much better in a society with a functioning civil society. And to get that, yeah, you definitely should lower taxes. But yeah, and that is really a big part of it. But what also needs to happen, and you should start praying, because revival is needed in Sweden and in Norway to get, well, to get this function in society. We need both lower taxes, personal responsibility, and all these things. Also, that lower taxes would make it easier to start businesses. We need fewer regulations. There are so many things that needs to be done. But most of all, really, Sweden needs Jesus Christ. And he could restore Sweden to be greater than it ever was. And the same goes for Norway. So that's really what I have to say about this. You need a civil society to have a functioning society, to have freedom that works. But to get this, yeah, the political things you can do is lower taxes, less regulations, more focus on personal responsibility. Of course, you also need to remove the entire opinion corridor, which really makes a lot of people unemployable. Yeah, that's a sinister thing. I'm going to talk about that in another video. But pray for Sweden and pray for Norway. Revival is very greatly needed. And those are my final words on this. Well, final for right now. I would like to thank the people who are supporting this channel. Through prayers, through PayPal, through Patreon. And all help is greatly appreciated. And if you like this channel, please subscribe so you don't miss anything. Please like my videos if you like them. Please share my videos on social media, on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And if you got something to say, please comment. And I would also like to ask you, or I would also like to encourage you to support this channel. That can be done through PayPal, it can be done through Patreon, and I will include the necessary information in the information box below. This is A Swede Speaks. Have a nice day.